Good evening. Welcome to our new edition of Town Administrator's Report. I'm David Watts Jr., and with me is our Town Administrator, Steve Maio. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, David. How are you?
Good. Did you enjoy July off?
Who had July off? Did somebody have July off?
Well, the show did.
Okay, that's right.
And also with us is our Superintendent of Schools, Doug Lyons. Welcome, Doug.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Doug definitely didn't have July off.
No,
so.
no. And that's actually what we're here to talk about, because literally everybody across the board is worried about schools reopening. And, on the one hand, kids need to get back to learning. But on the other hand, things are still not under control with regard to COVID-19. So, Doug, first, give us an idea of what the plan is that was submitted to the state last week.
Sure. Last Wednesday night on the 12th at school committee, we presented a hybrid plan to return to school. And it's a hybrid plan with a phased-in approach, similar to the way the governor is reopening the economy. So we're going to go kind of step by step. So the first 10 days of the school year are for professional development. And that time was decided by the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley. All districts, no matter what plan you are opening in, are the first 10 days, school days for teachers are for professional development. And there's a lot to be done during that 10 days. It seems like a long time, but it's not when you look at the list of what needs to be done. There's going to be professional development on safety, first and foremost. Like, what are the safety precautions that not only will teachers take, but also what safety precautions students will take, how we will kind of maintain social distancing, how we will promote hand hygiene and kind of just being safe, not only for ourselves, but for others. So that's one of our professional development topics. The other professional development topics include kind of the use of technology for synchronous and asynchronous teaching. And we're just loaded. So we're full across the board with the things that we're going to be doing during that 10 days. But we're going to be sharing more information on that next Tuesday night at school committee.
Now, is this going to be as far as the schools themselves, okay, grammar schools, middle school, high school, is that also somehow going to be phased into action?
So we're the calendar that we're using in terms of the phases, the first 10 days from really August 31st and the 1st will be our first teacher professional day is what is the plan there. So we'll get 3 professional days in the first week. We will continue to have the 4th off ahead of Labor Day like we have in the past. And then Labor Day is Monday, and then we'll have 4 days the following week, and then 3 days the week after that. And then we will start, after the 10 days, we'll start what we're calling phase 2. And during phase 2, the majority of our students will be starting to learn remotely. And the reason we started phase 2 with everyone learning remotely was to be prepared, because we think sooner than later, everyone is going to need to go remote, right? And we just wanted to be more prepared than we were last spring, right? We want to make sure that all students have devices. We want to make sure that all students have access to wireless connectivity, and as well as their ability to access the curriculum, so to be able to get on. So, but during phase 2, we also plan on having small groups of students coming into schools for special education services, and for small groups of students to come in to make relationships with teachers who are new to buildings. So students that would be new to buildings, for example, grade 5 students at middle and grade 9 students at the high school. They've never been in these buildings before, except maybe to visit a sibling or to visit quickly, right? We didn't get a lot of the kind of the move up work done in the spring because we closed so quickly.
Now, what about the kindergartners who are starting out too?
You just finished my sentence, because the third or the fourth group really is our kindergartners. So during the first few days, we're going to be doing some kind of meet and greet and relational work, and be doing some screening work before we really put our finishing touches on class lists. So that's the plan there.
Now, you mentioned remote learning, and some towns are very ahead of this curve, and some towns not so much. And I'm not sure where Wakefield is, but the biggest concern is for those families who do not have the means to have a laptop or a Chromebook for a child and internet connectivity. How is the school system going to address this so that they don't fall further behind their peers?
So we've collaborated with our town leadership and Steve to look at some of our COVID relief money in the spring. And what we've done is we have ordered enough Chromebooks for our students who may need machines in grades K through 8. In our high school, the system that we use is a BYOD, or bring your own device. So students at the high school level have their own machines. But K through 8, we're prepared to open school and to provide students with a device if they need it. And in terms of connectivity, that's one of the things that we're going to be working on, David, in the first few days, is just making sure that all students have a device that they can get on, right, and that they can access the curriculum and log on. And I know our teachers are working creatively on how to make relationships, right? And so, the first things that students will be doing is, logging on and kind of just connecting with the teacher, right? Making sure that they can kind of do that. And for the teachers, that's a check and balance as well. And we'll kind of do, at the end of each day, we'll figure out who is kind of doing it well and who might need support. And we will reach out to families to see how we can support and make sure that they can get on.
And let me jump into your first part of your question, was how has Wakefield handled remote in the past? I'll tell you, Wakefield has been the gold standard in this area for remote learning. A lot of other communities, when the governor did close down schools, I think it was March 17th or 18th, or what was the day?
I think it was, I think
I forget the exact day. Other communities, took a whole month or so even to do anything. Nothing happened because they hadn't had that remote learning set up prior to that. Wakefield had been way ahead of the curve on this, and had been provided that, on the so-called snow days. There aren't snow days anymore, and there was remote learning then. And I think I gotta thank Doug for keeping me in the loop in his plans. I got to see all these plans that they put out, very thoughtful, very specific, looking at every area, almost every grade separately, almost every block of time separately. So really, I'd say much more robust remote learning will be than we had in the spring.
Yeah.
Because frankly, we're going to be a little bit better at it than we were before, and it's going to have to be for a more sustainable time. But I do think that socialization piece that Doug talked about is very important, about getting the kids back into some sort of a routine where they meet their teachers, they come to school, and what have you. So I think they've done a fabulous job.
Well, and if you look back at the last great pandemic, which was the 1918-1920
how was it
flu
back then?
pandemic.
Can you let us know?
I'm sure your dad could tell us
He
about
probably
it.
could. Well, my dad was born in 1938, so no.
I was born in 1954, but I did have a grandmother who was a nurse during the pandemic. Anyway, one of the things that they found was putting the kids back into school was important, just as we're saying that today. What differed was that it was the beginning of school nurses in every school. It was the beginning of playgrounds. It was the beginning of gyms. It was the beginning of a lot of things that we take for granted today in the school systems. But that also raises the question, will there be a school nurse to monitor the situation at each school?
So I think we've been ahead of the curve here as well. And so there are minimum requirements for nurses in terms of the sizes of our buildings. And we've kind of taken what I would argue is a conservative tack, and all of our buildings, regardless of the size, has at least one nurse. Our largest schools, the high school and the middle school, have 2 nurses. We're also, because of the pandemic and the added responsibility, that our nurses are going to have, even to get students back in a hybrid, which is what we're going to do here, which would be phase 3 of our model. So we're going to have to add nursing help to support our nurses just to kind of safely operate our schools day to day. And so, and we'll do that for as long as it takes to make sure we can bring our students back safely and keep them in school safely.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, every school will have at least one nurse. And there will be additional staff that will support us as well. I also have to say that a terrific partner for us in our summer program. So we brought back students for summer programming at Woodville. And during that summer program, we had 2 nurses on staff. But a terrific partner for us has been our local Board of Health.
Yeah.
Anytime we've had questions, we've contacted the local Board of Health. They are in contact with the state Board of Health, daily or if not multiple times a day. So they've been just terrific allies for us. And I know as we move into the fall, they'll continue that work.
And it's interesting you raise that because, although the Board of Health didn't return my call earlier today to confirm this information, Wakefield is currently classified by the state as green.
Yes.
Which is, white is the best you can be.
Right.
We're at the second level green.
And we've been consistently there.
Yes.
For a while.
Since
yeah.
they started publishing, especially, 11 new cases in the last 14 days and 1.0% average positivity in the last 14 days, which is pretty good among communities.
And I think that those metrics are very important.
Yeah.
It's really, state has issued a lot of guidance on this, and I think the governor has said if you are a green, or I guess it's a non-colored white community, right?
Right.
That they aren't designating anything. You should do what you can to try to get the kids back into school for that socialization,
Right.
and for that learning. So I think we're taking that to heart, and I commend Doug and I commend the school committee for putting together this very thoughtful hybrid plan. They listened to parental input. And I think that it flip-flopped a couple of times. I think I thought it was going to be, we had talked about A, and then it was going to be B, and then it switched back to A+. So it was a constant moving target for them. I do say that my personal views as a parent, when I think back as a parent of kids in schools, much different than my views as a grandparent. I think you might share that as well. But so we had to hear from parents and grandparents. Doug had to hear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that.
Right.
But I think very thoughtful, and I think the community is apprehensive. They're apprehensive about everything. And let's face it, no one is happy with this whole situation, right? We wish that we had, football going on. We had a normal start to the school year. We all get that. We wish we had all those events around the lake all summer. Wish we had WCAT movies around the summer. We get that. But this is trying to do the best we can to move forward, and I think that this is a really, really good plan in getting that hybrid plan. And by the way, if parents are still apprehensive, they can what? Opt out?
They can opt into a remote
Opt into
plan,
remote learning.
right?
Yeah.
And
So that is the option is that parents, if they are really truly concerned, can do 100% remote.
correct.
And we're comfortable that the kids at the end of the day are going to have as good an educational experience as if they were in class.
I would argue no.
No.
Not
As good as it can be.
as
I
good
would
as it can be, right?
Yeah.
Like Steve said,
Yeah.
is our first choice. So we created 3 plans, as all districts needed to do.
Yeah.
We looked at the possibility of coming back for a full in-person plan. We looked at a hybrid plan, which is sometime in person, sometime remote, and then we looked at full remote. Okay, and just as a context of the 371 school districts in the state, I think the governor shared this information in his last press conference. 70% have chosen a hybrid plan, which is sometime remote, sometime in person.
Right.
Okay, and all of this is predicated or based on the public health data and the transmission of the virus, right? So, and if you are a family that felt like your child could not participate in the hybrid plan, part-time in person, you could choose the all remote plan. And so, and that's been a little difficult. And the reason I say that, David, is because we know that there are going to be some students that are unable to come back. We also know that there are going to be faculty members that are going to be unable to come back, right? So our plan is to use, and to try to work with our teachers that may not be able to come back, right? To try to staff and manage and support the students that are not going to be in a hybrid model.
Right.
And so it's like creating a fourth plan, right? So we have, all remote for the district like we were this past spring, all in person. The hybrid is kind of the middle plan, some in person, some remote. And then we have what we're calling our remote academy here.
Right.
And we're working right now on the staffing for that, right? And it's coming right up to the calendar of the start of the school year, because we're also working with faculty to see who's able to come back, because this hybrid model presents a challenge for families.
Right.
It also presents a challenge for our staff, right? Who might have children at home.
Right.
Whose children might not be on the same schedule that we're on. Right? So there are layers to this that have been very, very difficult for our staff.
Or faculty or staff who are somehow their health is compromised.
Correct.
So that there's been a lot of stuff with regard to the teachers, the Mass Teachers Association, and their concerns. I know that the Mass Teachers Association has come up with 19 points that they'd like addressed by the individual school departments. Where is Wakefield on those 19 points?
We're working with our local association, our local teachers union, right? The Wakefield Education Association, and our president, William Caravanis, right? And so what we're doing is we're going down that list and we're kind of getting as much work done as we possibly can, right? And so the challenge there, it's like securing PPEs, right? Everyone is doing this all at once.
Right.
So for some of the items, we're kind of in a queue with other districts to get things done. But we've just contracted this week to have an engineering firm kind of do an assessment of our HVAC system. And so we're going to be kind of reporting to faculty at the end of the week where we are with safety, facilities, and our HVAC and all the work that's been done. Our DPW and Joe Conway and his staff, Chris Pierce, have been amazing. We have a standing meeting with them every Friday. We review all preventative maintenance. They have gone over everything, soup to nuts. And Wakefield is one of the few communities that also has an HVAC tech employed full-time to work with us. So we're going through all systems to make sure that they're working appropriately, that the airflow in rooms is working well. If we have interior rooms that don't have windows, we are providing, if we're going to use those rooms for teaching and learning, we're going to provide kind of air purifiers in those rooms with HEPA filters. And so there's a kind of a list that will be coming out at the end of the week to faculty, and then early next week on just kind of the state of the state in terms of where we are with safety, facilities overall, and where we are with HVAC.
Because there are buildings that don't have HVAC given their age.
Correct.
Greenwood School down the street from me is one.
Correct.
Okay, people in Greenwood would riot if there was any suggestion of taking that building away. But at the same time, ventilation is something that's going to be absolutely important.
Right.
If you go back again to 1918, they would jack up the heat in buildings and open the windows in the wintertime to get that ventilation.
Yeah.
And so the air purifiers is one solution. Will that actually be effective in a building of the age of, say, Greenwood or some of the West Side schools?
So if we're talking about Walton on the West Side, and so Walton has just had an entirely new HVAC system installed with all new univents, with heating, ventilation, and air conditioning throughout the entire building. So that's a newly commissioned system. And so I would argue that they're going to be their assessment is going to go really remarkably well.
Galvin is fairly new.
Galvin is done. We've also had kind of an air quality test done in the majority of our schools, right? So that's something that we are going to be we've made available on our website, but we'll continue to make that available for example, to our association. But in regard to, I'm glad you brought up Greenwood, because we often get a question about Greenwood. So what about Greenwood? What does this mean? They don't have air conditioning. Well, a lot of parts of our high school don't have air conditioning, and parts of our high school are particularly chilly, right? And so that's one of the reasons why we're in the queue for a new school. But in regard to Greenwood specifically, and the general feedback that we've gotten from kind of our HVAC people is, because the building is constructed the way it is, with all of the rooms on the perimeter and all of you
windows.
Have plenty of access where you have at least several windows in rooms where you have cross ventilation. And so to quote one of our HVAC people, shy of pitching a tent in the parking lot, that school is going to work out just fine. Now, again, that's not going to preclude us from having our assessment done and providing that information and making it very public. But we'll do whatever we need to do to ensure that it's safe for students and teachers to return. Our buildings were safe when teachers left.
Right.
I would argue that in the 61 days that we've been closed, from March 13th forward, 61 school days, we've cleaned and sanitized every single room. We've gone through every univent. We've replaced every filter. I would argue that I don't know if our buildings have ever been cleaner. I don't know if our HVAC system has ever been operating better than it has right now. And so again, that's not going to stop us from publishing or providing whatever information that we need to provide on that checklist to make sure that people feel safe.
I think an excellent point in this, and Doug made in the beginning, was that we are very fortunate that we do have our own personnel, HVAC personnel on this, because it's very difficult. You think about even in this big heat wave, trying to get an air conditioner, a window air conditioner is huge to people right there. You can't find them anywhere. Getting someone to come in and do HVAC at your house, put in a Mitsubishi system or something, very difficult to get people. They're out straight. We have our own staff that are out there, and that has made a huge difference. And I was talking to Mike today, and said, "How you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm going back up on the roof at the high school. I almost got it down, Steve." So he's got it, and he had a smile. He was thrilled that they're going that way. So, and I agree, the synergy's been great between Facilities Director Bob Shiroli, Doug, and our staff. I think Doug and I are uninvolved to a certain extent. These guys are making it all work, which is perfect, right? It's exactly what we wanted to happen. So, really good staff, and I can't talk enough about how they're working together to make it happen.
But I think it eventually all comes back to teachers also, and how things are going to happen for them. So you say there are some teachers that won't be able to come back. What will happen to their jobs?
It depends. There's a lot of variables there, and it depends on the reason that they can't return. So it's not kind of a linear A to B, B to C, right? And so one of the things that we've kind of agreed to as leaders, Steve and I are on the same page here, that we're working really hard to maintain positions and personnel, right? And so there's plenty of work to do. So we have teachers this past summer that have made home visits to students to support them in their learning. We have teachers that have worked over the summer that have gotten onto conference calls, or Zoom calls, or Google calls, whatever system that they use to support students in their reading and in their math, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I don't know that it's a linear, if someone can't come back, then what happens to their job? I think the next question is, if someone can't come back, the question is, could they fill in any of these other areas that we might need help? And that's a little bit of a Sudoku problem as well, because of course they need to be a match in regard to their certification, in regard to their levels. But I think we're going to work on that, and I think it's really going to work. Again, not our first choice is always in person, but I think if the cup is half full, I think we have a really talented staff, and I think to quote one of our WA leaders, this is an all hands event, and our jobs are not the jobs that we left on March 12th, so we know that we need to adapt and make it work.
Yeah, because, through nobody's fault,
Right.
the dislocation that has gone on, not just in the schools, across the board,
Yeah,
has been extreme at best.
yeah,
But once this gets handled, presumably with a vaccine, hopefully sooner rather than later, and some of the news apparently seems to be good, we'll see. But, how do we fix those dislocations down the road? Because it's going to affect not just the teachers who may or may not be available any longer, but the students that those teachers taught. And we know that education in general has been difficult, not just over this, but for decades. And, how do we come out of this so that the kids are better off, not worse off than they were before March 21st?
yeah. We were just having this conversation this morning, which is kind of thinking through this. Thinking to the other side of this. How do we provide services for students to try to compensate for areas that they have had difficulty, or areas where they have had regression or loss, right? And so that's a really complicated question with a long kind of series of options that I think this is what all district leaders, and I would argue teachers and certainly parents are kind of grappling with. Yeah, and so I think we're trying to get our arms around that. But one of the first things, we're really focused right now, David, on just trying to get our teachers in, to get them settled, and then to continue to get our students into our schools that really, really need to be here, right? That remote learning is just, it doesn't work for them, right? Because for any number of reasons, they might be receiving services, or they might be in a program, or so, and we know that with the elementary model that we've created for our hybrid, it's kind of a split day. There's a morning session and an afternoon session. One of the reasons why we chose that session, it's not an easy choice, right? It's a difficult schedule. It's difficult for families, difficult for teachers, but what it does do is it takes the pressure off of families, and I would argue off of our teachers as well, for the remote piece, because our K1 students, learning from a screen is really not a great proposition to start them off, especially if they're new to our schools, right?
I think that one thing is a little heartening in this, in a positive light, is I think we have all become, and I think teachers, administrators, clerical staff, inspectors, everybody have become much better technologically through this. We've learned to get over some of our fears and to use Zoom and to have alternate means of communication. And I think that there are some that actually have maybe, I want to use the word thrived, but have maybe found it a little bit easier for them. Doug and I were talking about this a few weeks ago. Maybe some of the distractions were out. There was more of a focus, and others that weren't. Well, it was much more difficult. But some of the students that maybe were had much tougher time in the classroom seemed to have a little bit better time on this one-on-one with the Zoom, and that's kind of an interesting anomaly. So I think it all comes back to what we talk about is what is the best way to reach every student. And every student is different. I remember a teacher telling me that every student should have their own IEP, their own individual education plan. And I guess to a certain extent, we're almost getting there now because of the hybrid and because of how we use technology, how we use in class. So I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic when you think about it. I think we'll come out of this, it may take 6 months, it may take a year. I think much better, much stronger, much smarter, and how we, together educate the children. So I'm looking on the positive of this once we get through this kind of bubble over the next few months, because I'm hopeful with you too that there will be a vaccine and we can get back to some semblance of normal. But I think we're going to be smarter. We're going to be more hygienic. I think mask wearing is here to stay. A lot of cultures are already doing that. Maybe we're going to continue to do that, or many people are.
Right. That's been a common thing in places like Tokyo for decades.
I think that families have come together a little bit more. I think there's some good out of this, and I think even educationally, when you get down into the bare bones, I think some students have benefited a little bit, and we need to put that all together and move it forward. So I think it's a great challenge, and then the school department has done great.
It also brings up some other aspects, and this is one that I've been critical of since it was established. I think it's going in the wrong direction, but MCAS. Yeah. How does MCAS fit into this new model?
Well, it didn't for this year. I don't know what have they decided for next year. Is it they haven't decided anything, right?
I think the Department of Education intends. So one of the things that people don't know is that MCAS is a federal requirement, right? It's also a state requirement, right? So this is kind of rooted in the No Child Left Behind legislation from years ago, right? And so in terms of accountability and part of that movement, right? So people think, the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, can summarily just dismiss the assessment. And that's not the case, right? And so I don't know how the assessment is going to fit into the year. So it's like everything else that we're doing. We know that kind of our jobs have changed, and we know that it's not going to be linear in regard to the amount of time we have in the classroom and the amount of kind of content that we're going to be able to cover. We know we're going to have to adapt. So my working theory is that the tests will also have to adapt. To what degree, we don't know yet. Whether they happen or whether they don't, we don't know that yet either. But for them to be suspended or for them to not happen this year, there will have to be permission granted from the federal government and from our state legislators.
What was done last spring that was different?
Exactly what I just described. And so that we got kind of a dispensation from...
So the federal government...
Correct. Gave
a dispensation for last spring that said, okay, don't worry about it.
Yeah. And so, yes. So, yes.
And that's why, as Doug said, is that the state just couldn't make that call. They needed to get, I wouldn't say permission, get acceptance of that, I guess.
Right.
Maybe a better term to say.
Right. Blessing.
Yeah.
Other areas that are being hurt by this, part of the value of the educational experience, especially K through 12, is socialization. Technology, as we know, does completely opposite that. If anything, it is anti-socialization. So again, the kids are going to lose out on a fundamental experience that will color the rest of their lives. What are some of the ideas for compensating for that?
And so I would add to that there's also a professional isolation that has happened through this closure, where people that have worked together, people that have co-planned in their teaching together, have also been forced to work differently and sometimes in isolation. It's been particularly hard on all adults and all families, right? And so I subscribe to the same school of thought as Steve, in that like all problems bear gifts, right? And so families have gotten closer together. They've spent more time together. And sometimes that's gone well. I can say in the Lyons household, sometimes that's gone fantastically. Other times it's been a little sticky. But overall, I think, there's been some good. But in regard to your question about the social isolation, I think that you hit on something that's really, really a critical part of education beyond the content areas that we teach. I think it's become more evident now that kind of the social supports, the interaction, and the relationships that students have in a school community, and adults as well, again, are really just a critical part of student development,
Right.
of child development. And so our plans moving forward, as we move into the fall, is to try to build time into the schedules for more adults to interact with students and for us to keep closer tabs on students. So there are some things that are going to be significantly different this fall compared to last spring. So I think we did a lot well last year, but I also think that there was areas of growth for us. For example, this year we're going to be, taking attendance. We're going to be assessing students online. There are things that are going to be more like traditional school that we're going to try to implement through our in-person and through our remote model. And so, and part of that is keeping tabs on kids and connecting with kids and having relationships with them.
Right.
And if they need support or if parents need support, we're going to have counselors in our schools available, and our assistant principals and principals
Right.
are going to kind of keep track of where students are in regard to their participation, their engagement, and how they are developing. And if we need to kind of provide additional resources or provide an additional support there, we will work to do that.
Because the fundamental idea behind that socialization is learning to deal with people from other backgrounds, learning to deal with people with other ideas. And we know how that doesn't work well online. It doesn't work well with technology. In fact, it breaks down violently from time to time. And that's a concern there too. And going forward, how do we fix that?
Well, I
and those
think,
are the things I think we need to think about.
Yeah, I'm very concerned with that with the kindergarten, elementary kids, because I think you learn so much about, everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten, sort of thing. That to me, I'm very concerned about. I think that the high school kids and the junior high kids who grew up with this thing and they know how to use it, and that's kind of part of it. And even when they're all sitting in a circle, they're still using it with each other. So
it's too late for them.
But I think that they figured out they have socialized it. I think the younger kids. So I think that getting the kids back in a little bit early to meet the teachers, get into the school, get familiar with it, I think is a great thing. I think you see colleges struggling with that too. It's not just distancing people. It's like bringing the freshman class in, and the seniors want to be there, and mixing them in. So I think that's a challenge. I think that's a challenge for society in general.
Yeah.
I think that's a challenge for our seniors that really miss going to the senior center and having these issues, these sing-alongs and what have you.
Right.
I think we're still grappling with how do we do that in a 6 foot apart world. So I think that's an evolution for schools. It's an evolution for people at town hall. It's an evolution for our society. So
Right.
we'll have to have another show on that when we figure it out, October or November.
Absolutely. Well, I think, going forward over the next few shows, these are kind of the threads of things we're going to have to discuss and face, and maybe bring other people in to talk about this, because I know in my own experience with a colleague who's 89 years old, he's been stuck in his apartment since March in Boston. Not a whole lot you can do.
Right.
And so it's, some of it is, well, hey, how about kind of doing this, or, but at 89, he's of course reluctant to go out, and I can understand that. A lot of people in their mid-60s like me may be reluctant to go out, or go anywhere. And so, but we're already socialized. We either have a social component to our life or we don't.
Right.
The kids, even going into middle school, used to call it junior high when I was a kid, middle school or high school are still developing that.
Right. They are,
faculty.
but they're developing it much better with technology, and they can move within it, I think, a little bit better than we can.
Yeah.
But it is a challenge.
Yeah.
It is a challenge, yeah.
Yeah. The other challenges, of course, sports pretty much are gone.
Well, no, they're
Okay.
not.
Yeah.
They're not. And so that's
Stay tuned, it changes.
yeah, that's kind of our latest news flash.
Yeah.
Last night, we got an update from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the MIAA, who've been partnering together
Yeah.
to try to resurrect some opportunity for fall sports. And they have issued guidance, and we will be kind of releasing that. We'll be talking about it next week at school committee on Tuesday evening.
Okay.
But there'll be more information that is going to be coming out from the Wakefield Public Schools and from all communities about kind of opportunities for our students. I will say that everything that's being issued in regard to guidance, it all comes with an asterisk.
Yeah.
And the asterisk is, all options or opportunities would be offered based on safety, right?
Right.
And based on the spread of the virus. If a community, for example, is in the red demarcation based on the COVID-19 and DPH metric that Steve referred to, they would be advised that it would not be safe for them to participate or to create fall sports.
Right.
And so there'll be more information on that. But extracurricular activities at Wakefield's across the board in the Wakefield Public Schools is just a tremendous part of
Right.
our education. And that goes to music, theater, as well as sports.
Yeah.
Right. Music has always been a big department here at the high school, especially. Okay.
So you think
For
about
those
that.
new to Wakefield, we're surrounded by the high school here at WCAT.
Yeah.
But, so the music programs have always been very important. The theater program is important. Other creative endeavors within
Art, very big.
art especially.
Yeah.
Art especially. So hopefully there will be ways that the kids can still benefit from those within the four corners of keeping everyone as safe as possible.
A lot of challenges.
A lot of challenges. Hopefully, all of the different constituencies will be able to have their say, to be able to come to an understanding of how things can be done safely for the time that we need to do it until we do have a vaccine or whatever other treatment comes along that mitigates this. We do have some other updates. Greenwood School roof.
Yeah, well, a couple other things. We continue on with some other projects that we've had, right?
Yep.
Everything couldn't stop, and Greenwood roof was a kind of a difficult process to go through because we had to go through a town meeting, which was kind of tough putting that together, as you know, as WCAT knows, as Doug knows, and Greenwood roof got funded. Then it was scrambling to get that done, and I think it's kind of really cool that the company that was the low bid was Greenwood company. I thought
Yeah.
it was comma, on that, but that is basically almost done, right?
Yep.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, we should. And not only the roof was done, we had a number of ADA,
ADA upgrades too.
updates that have happened to the building, which is fantastic.
The old wooden ramp outside one of the kindergarten classrooms was replaced with a new wooden ramp,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but with cement footings.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's been done. We have an ADA accessible bathroom
Yeah.
that was put in. We didn't have before on the first floor, which is fantastic. And so, Yeah, so there's a lot has been done at Greenwood in addition to the roof.
And that was a great project because it had been on our capital list, that roof, for a long time.
Right.
And B, and Doug and I were talking, said, let's put it in for the state. Let's see what happens. State's covering 50%. Let's call it 50% of the project. And the project came in below, what we thought.
Right.
So that's a positive thing. So that's, that's a great that we were able to get that together. And the second one is the building we're in now, the high school. So the high school is that we have been meeting certain milestones with the SBA. We had to set up a committee. We had to give them an educational plan. We had to give them all of those things. So we're working hard on that too. And this September, we will have a meeting with SBA regarding enrollment and what our projections are. And that's always an interesting meeting that I'll be saying, we got to make it as big as we can. We can't build a school too small. I think Doug and I will be on the same page on that one.
No, we connect on this. The best advice we have is, don't short yourself in regard to square
Don't short
footage.
yourself on this. And then I expect that we will be in front of town meeting in November, requesting funding for the feasibility study that will really get into the works, where we will go out through the SBA. We'll hire an owner's project manager, which we need to do, which is a much better system now than it was before. And then we will have to go in and hire, call it an architect, that will come up with some options. And then the community can discuss them. And there's a lot of discussion about this. I'm lucky to be on the vocational school committee, and I'm really enjoying it. So they're just a little bit ahead of that, and they've got, I think, 3 preferred options at this point that they are putting forward. So it's
except for the core of this building, which was the junior high, the surrounding additions are younger than the Voc School.
Correct.
By about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. So those are exciting times, and we'll be putting forward with that too. So stay tuned.
But you also bring up, and I know Doug can't address this, but you also bring up an interesting point that does affect Wakefield students too, and that is the Voc School. It's hard to teach vocational education in a COVID-19 world.
Correct.
Since so much of it is hands-on.
Right. I think they announced their plan, or I think it was published yesterday, probably published before. I did not have a chance to read it yet. Did you read the Voc's plan?
I have not had a chance.
But in my discussions with Superintendent DeBarry up there, it is a different animal, right? It is, I don't know how you teach auto mechanics and auto repair and what have you.
Cosmetology.
Or what have you. So there's a little bit of a different dynamic there.
Yeah.
And you have students from many different communities coming in there, communities that are at different levels on the state's list.
Some of those communities are
red.
approaching red, yes.
Are red. Some of them are red.
Yeah.
At least one is red.
Yeah.
Two may be red on there. So that's another dynamic that they're dealing with up there, and we'll work through it.
So town meeting in November.
Town meeting in November.
We'll have to talk about how that's going to be done.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
I thought the last one worked very well on a Saturday. I'm just saying.
I think it worked spectacularly well on a Saturday, but I also used to live in Rockport and loved Saturday town meetings. So
we'll have to see.
We'll
have to see.
It definitely, especially if you can open up the cafeteria for people, then you really have them.
Oh, we'll open up that.
Coffee in the morning, lunch, but hopefully all the constituencies here with regard to the school opening will be able to feel that their concerns have been addressed, that they are able to go back safely, especially our students and our teachers, because without the teachers, of course, nothing works. Hopefully we will see this begin to change for the better as we get into 2021.
And I think the school department, Doug in particular, has done a great job listening to the community and tweaking the plans where they can with the idea that, hey, we do need, the goal is to get children back and learning well. And I think commend you and your staff and your
Thank
committee for doing that really, really well. So we're there to work with them.
And hopefully we can do an update in September or October and see where we're at. Maybe show people some of the mitigations that are going on so that they can see it. But in the meantime, to keep up to date, those who are viewing this show, please watch the school committee meetings. If you have any concerns, any questions, go to the school committee meetings and address your concerns that way. Is there an online way that they can address their concerns at school committee meetings also?
There is. What we're changing public participation in our next meeting.
Yeah.
So we're in kind of a hybrid model for our school committee. So we're going to have 5 members, five people in studio. We'll have our chair and our vice chair here, and we'll have our school business administrator, our assistant superintendent, and myself will be presenting. Everyone else will be participating via Zoom. And so when we put the agenda, when we publish the agenda, there is a link to Zoom that people can join in. And during public participation and public comment, people can kind of identify themselves, raise their hand, and we will ask them to kind of share whatever comments that they have prepared, or questions or concerns that they might have. It's not a time when the committee interacts or answers questions, but it allows people to voice their comments. And so, so a change for us this meeting, which is next week, will be we're going to ask people to join the call and to read their comments. Whereas in the past meetings, what we've done is people have submitted comments to us and we've read them. So.
And I think this is a time when people need to participate. Get off of Facebook, get off of social media, and actually participate and make a difference.
I don't think that's where it's been no shortage of that on the school side. I feel like people have been terrific reaching out to us, and they've kind of let us know what's been difficult.
Yep.
And we've tried to listen thoughtfully and tried to respond in ways that we can. Obviously, there are limitations during this time, but yes, I think you're right. I do think we need to continue the participation, and we need to continue to have the input if we're going to be as good as we need to be for all students and for all families. I agree.
I agree with them.
Okay.
Great.
We'll pick up on this again in September and see where we're at.
Sounds like a plan.
We will be approaching the beginning of kids coming into school, and we'll stay on this for as long as we need to, so that everyone's as fully informed as possible.
Correct.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you
Steve,
for having me.
very
Thank you,
much.
Dave. Thank you, WCAT.
And thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.